Welcome to this digital meeting about housing guidance. The purpose of this meeting is to give you information and tools you can use to find housing. The film takes about 20 minutes. After the film, you can ask the person your questions. You are living in SOS housing while looking for housing on the regular housing market. This means that you need to look for other apartments where you're living here. Your SOS lease is for a limited period and will not be renewed. We at SOS can help you by showing you how to look for housing. But it is your responsibility to find housing. We at SOS can assist you in your search for housing. But you are the one responsible to finding housing for you and your family. Today, we will be talking about settling in a municipality. Why was I assigned to Stockholm? What is SOS? What is the mission of SOS? The housing market and types of housing. How do I find an apartment? What is important to remember? The housing market and the housing situation in Stockholm and Sweden. The housing situation in areas surrounding Stockholm. Part 1. Settling in a municipality. Why was I assigned to Stockholm? As you know, many people come to Sweden to seek protection. To get a residence permit, you need to contact the migration agency. Once you've received your residence permit, you have the right to live and move anywhere in Sweden. Some people who get a residence permit find housing themselves or move in with family members. According to Bostadsvägledning, the 2016 law about settling immigrants, when you are a new arrival, you have the right to ask for help to settle in a municipality. You accepted placement in the city of Stockholm and were given temporary housing in this municipality. There are 26 municipalities, kommuner, in the county of Stockholm. One of them is the city of Stockholm, where you live. The type and length of leases for housing for new arrivals is entirely up to the municipality. Certain municipalities in Sweden offer regular leases directly with the landlord. Part 2. What is SOS? What is the mission of SOS? SOS is the landlord for temporary housing for newly arrived immigrants in the city of Stockholm. Our goal is for all of our tenants to be able to enter the housing market. The lease is always for a limited term, and our goal is for all of our tenants to move to their own homes. From the start, remember that SOS can be a reference when you look for housing. Being a reference means that the landlord can phone us and ask whether you are a good tenant. They can ask questions like: have you been paying your rent on time? Have there been any complaints about you? Have you taken good care of the apartment? A good reference is important when you are looking for housing. It is very difficult to get a new apartment when you owe rent. If you have problems with owing rent, you can get help from both the municipality and SOIS. Ask your maintenance personnel, bovärd, if you need to schedule a meeting with our budget and debt advisor. Part 3. The housing market and forms of housing. There are many different forms of housing you can apply for: cooperative apartment, rental apartment, solid apartment, shared apartment. Cooperative apartment. A cooperative apartment means that you buy the rights to an apartment. To do that, you need to have saved up enough money to take a loan from the bank. If you are interested in buying an apartment, speak with our personnel. They will be happy to give you more information. Rental apartment. A rental apartment is an apartment you rent directly from a landlord. This is often called a förstahandskontrakt, which means a first-hand lease. Sublet apartment. Subletting means that you rent an apartment from a person who has a rental lease or a cooperative apartment. A sublet is a limited-term tenancy. The person you rent the apartment from must have the landlord's approval. Shared apartment. Shared apartment means that you rent a room or a part of an apartment together with other persons. You have your own room and share the kitchen and bathroom with others who live in the apartment. It is very important to be cautious when looking for housing. Unfortunately, there are people who want to cheat you out of your money. For example, by what is called illegal leases. These are leases for rental apartments that are sold and bought for money. In Sweden, no one is allowed to accept payment for or sell a rental lease. A person who wants you to pay for a lease is committing a crime and can be sent to prison. Part 4. How do I find an apartment? What is important to remember? I want to find a first-hand lease for a rental apartment. This is what you should be thinking about. The most common way to lease a rental apartment is through a housing queue. You must be registered in a queue and be actively looking for an apartment. It is important to be active, to log on frequently, and register interest in apartments. Our personnel can show you how to do it and help you register for housing queues. It is a good idea to join as many housing queues as possible in all the municipalities where you will consider living. Most often, you can register for a housing queue free of charge. I want to find a sublet or a room. This is what you should be thinking about. The most common way of finding a sublet or a room is to search the housing ads on the internet. There are many sites that have housing ads. Ask our personnel if you want a list of different sites that have housing ads. It is important to use your contacts when you are looking for apartments. Tell your friends, workmates, and other people that you are looking for an apartment or a room. Also search the social media. For example, You can write on Facebook that you are looking for an apartment. Important to remember, when you are looking for housing, there are several things that are important to consider. References. As we mentioned before, SHIS is your housing reference. That's why it is important that you take care of your apartment, pay the rent on time, and be considerate to your neighbors. Have all your papers in order. Be prepared to show documents that prove your salary, employment, or studies, as well as personbevis, which is an abstract of your population register entry from the tax authority when your future landlord requests them. Make sure you always get the lease. It is very important to always have a lease. The lease must clearly state what rent you need to pay, the term of the lease, and the length of the notice of termination period. Be careful. Never pay rent for an apartment you do not have a lease for. Don't pay any money before you get the keys. Check that the person you want to rent from really has the right to rent out of the apartment. If you feel unsure, ask our personnel. We are happy to help you. Part 5. The housing market and the housing situation in Stockholm and Sweden. There is a housing shortage in Stockholm and in other major cities in Sweden. There are many people who need housing, but there are not enough apartments. That's why the queue times for a first-hand rental apartment in Stockholm are long and getting longer every year. Most people who get a first-hand rental apartment in Stockholm have been in the queue between 6 and 12 years. The road to a first-hand lease. The road to a first-hand lease in Stockholm is usually long and complicated. Let's take an example. This is Adam. Adam lives in temporary housing at SHIS, and it's soon time for him to move on. He finds a sublet apartment, but after his lease is over, he has to move on again. Adam finds a lease for a shared apartment, but that lease ends after 1 year. He finds a short-term lease for a year, then he needs to find new housing. Adam finds a sublet again, but after 6 months, he needs to find a new place to live. Maybe it will be a room again, or a hotel, or a hostel. This is the way things look like for many people who live in Stockholm, and not just for new arrivals. It takes time before you find a first-hand lease. If you are looking for an apartment, it is important to understand how the housing market looks in Stockholm. The housing situation and queue times vary a great deal in various parts of Sweden. But the places in Sweden with the very longest queues are Stockholm and Uppsala. If you have a good income, it can be worthwhile to look at newly built apartments. These are apartments that are completely new and no one has lived in them previously. Because the rent is usually higher, it is important that you have a good income. In many municipalities, you can get a first-hand lease on a newly built after less than 6 months in the queue. Even in Stockholm County, you can get a newly built apartment after a shorter time in the queue. As we mentioned previously, queues in Stockholm are long. An average time in the queue is about 9 years. But it is not impossible to find an apartment after a shorter time in the queue. It is important, however, that you satisfy all the requirements for the apartment. Let's take an example from the website of the Bostadsvägledning letting agency. An apartment in Täby with 3 rooms and a kitchen was transferred to a person who had been in the queue less than 4 years. The rent was 12,800 crowns. The landlord required that the tenants have an income of at least 39,000 crowns. That may sound like a lot of money, but if there are 2 persons who are working, it's quite doable. In that case, it's enough if each adult has a monthly income of 20,000 crowns. Having a job is important when you are looking for housing. With a steady income, you'll find more apartments will be available to you. Part 6. The housing situation in areas surrounding Stockholm. Some people choose to move to municipalities just outside of Stockholm. There are many municipalities that are located near Stockholm, and that can be reached in less than an hour by train. The waiting times on the queue are much shorter there than in Stockholm. Many people decide to move a bit outside of Stockholm and continue working or studying in the city. More than 100,000 people use trains, cars or bicycles to get from nearby counties to their jobs in Stockholm. You can always move back to Stockholm when you want to. You can also continue to collect queue points in housing queues in Stockholm. You don't lose your queue points in the Bostadsvägledning queue even if you move to another municipality or county. There are 290 municipalities in Sweden. Each municipality is obligated to provide certain activities according to law. This means that at each municipality there are schools and preschools, social services, healthcare, elder care, public transport. We at SHIS are pleased to provide you with guidance about how to find housing. But we will not find housing for you. No one will be able to do that. It is your responsibility to find housing. You are the one who must find housing for yourself and your family. If you need individual guidance, feel free to schedule an appointment with our personnel. Speak with your maintenance person, bovärd, if you want to schedule an appointment. When you're at home, think about what your next step will be in your search for housing. Begin today. It is important to be active when searching for housing. Good luck!